Welcome to Stories of Creativity. I'm your host, Jo Vertis, and today we're continuing my interview with Dr. Annett Richter. What could you learn about your own unique creativity by exploring a new medium? We'll start this segment with Annett's answer to that question.
Working with different media as a visual artist, something that sort of came more to the surface for me in the past year or so, especially taking some classes by other artists, hearing their wisdom, being sort of guided by them, in a medium that I maybe haven't worked with before. I recently experimented a little bit with charcoal, which was really fascinating and wonderful, and feeling out the properties of working with charcoal. I was working on a drawing of a couple of pumpkins, and this is in black and white, right? And I had taken a class with that same teacher a couple of months or so ago in an acrylic painting class, and I realized how I draw certain things actually exist cross media, if that makes sense. So the way you draw or paint something in one medium can resurface that same way when you work with another medium. And I'd never sort of conscientiously thought about this or realized this until the artist who taught the classes pointed that out. I see some similarities here between how you would draw and paint this and this. And I thought, yeah, you're right. That's so true. And I remember, when we study any form of art, we often start by imitating, right? Someone famous, someone else's art. And then we probably develop our own style at some point, or our own idiosyncrasies. Whether that's in the way we play an instrument, or the way we draw something, or the way we see something in life or in nature or in reality, and then we commit it to paper or screen or whatever. And that was very enlightening to hear and to have someone communicate sort of parallels between how I was working in different media. And I found that refreshing. And I'm not sure that I would have conscientiously seen that myself, maybe at some point. But it's wonderful here too, to be able to feel part of a community of learners and learners interacting with teachers, and getting feedback that enables you to grow or to see your own art differently, perhaps, or in a new way, and to also accept that, okay, this is how I tend to approach drawing this or that, and here's what I seem to naturally be doing when I draw a leaf, or when I draw a piece of fruit, or whatever it might be. And it was kind of neat to realize, yeah, it's connected, and it defines your approach, your style.
I'm so glad you said that. I think that's so spot on. That's something that working in multiple art forms can teach you about yourself and your creativity that you can't learn by just focusing on one discipline for your entire life. I actually that reminded me of something that I'd forgotten about too, long before I ever considered really investing much of my time into art, before I ever could have thought of calling myself an artist. I took a sculpting class when I lived in Belgium, and I just wanted to do it to, I guess, meet people and to have fun. I was really drawn to sculpting, but I'd never done it before. And we were assigned to make a piece using seashells as the form that we were replicating with clay, and then eventually we made it into a plaster piece. And the teacher told me that mine was very emotional, and that shocked me. I didn't even know a sculpture could be emotional. and then I connected that all of my music is emotional, and that was always what I impressed upon people when I played the piano back when I did that. They found it very emotional and very touching for that reason, and so that surprised me when I realized that I could put emotion into sculpting without even knowing it. So I definitely learned something about myself and how our unique creative spirits translate across art forms to become expressed as our unique selves. I think that's so beautiful. And I'm so happy that I had the opportunity to experience that and discover that about me. So I can imagine how fun that is for you to work in different mediums and art forms and find out more about your voice.
Right. It was a very, very special moment to realize, and I'm so, the sculptures, my goodness, I would be terrified of creating a sculpture. I've never done that before. It's 3D. But absolutely. I mean, I think sculptures can be very emotional in what they express. Reminds me of a set of sculptures that I saw in Dublin in Ireland a few years back, along the river there, that was portraying people during the Great Famine in the 19th century, when there was potato plight and there was a great scarcity of food everywhere, and so many people emigrated to the United States. But these sculptures were of people of different ages, older, middle-aged, young, including a couple of dogs, I think, as well, and they were all famished. And they expressed that in their postures and how they were, sort of walking along the river there. It was probably a group of at least 6 or maybe 8 figures, and they were all hunched over, very, very thin. And it just grabbed me and created a great deal of compassion and empathy. And just, I didn't expect to see something like this in Dublin, alongside of a great deal of modern high rises, shiny buildings, tall buildings. It was very stunning, and I was really impacted me. Anyway, I'm so glad you had that opportunity to try that and to get feedback from others. We look at our own art, I think, but we can look at our own art quite differently than someone else, or then it might speak to someone else. And it's so vital to hear how our art impacts others, for our own sense of growth as an artist, and our own understanding of how our art perhaps fits in with our community, or whichever community we're active in. And I think that's so powerful, so important.
Yes, I agree. What have you learned about yourself from all of these art forms, other than identifying your artistic style? Is there something else that you've learned about who you are?
I think the art that an artist creates always reflects something about their personality, their approach to creativity, their learning about the particular medium, maybe also the ways in which you are working with a particular medium differently from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded of colored pencils, the shading and blending, sort of a coexistence and mingling of colors and coming together to coexist. As I sort of like to look at life, where we are surrounded by people every day to one degree or another. We work with others, and perhaps seeing that as a visual analog to colors coexisting and working with one another on the page.
Sure, yeah.
I really enjoy that, thinking about that kind of paradigm and analog. Yeah, and being open to ideas and trying, maybe colors that you maybe aren't as inclined to use with one another or next to one another. You meet someone new and you learn a little bit about them, and maybe you find a way to be creative with them, or maybe they have some sort of creative vein from their background. Right now I'm reconnecting with a poet, a local poet, who wrote a couple of poems for two of my paintings for an exhibit I had last fall at a gallery here in town. And I gave no prescription in terms of what the poem has to be about. I shared with her a couple of the alcohol ink paintings after I asked her what sorts of colors is she drawn to. And so I sent her the images, and they were both untitled. I didn't want her to feel persuaded one way or another. And she wrote two poems, one for each, and they were part of the exhibit. And,
what a cool collaboration.
Yeah.
I love that.
Cool, yeah. And I had read some of her poetry before, and I was really inspired. And after working with a local theater this spring, making art for one of their plays, I'm so encouraged to work with artists from other media, other fields, and see what might happen if we come together, our creative ideas. It's just so wonderful. Yeah. And so I'm seeing her actually this week, and we'll see. We'll just brainstorm. There's nothing carved in stone or anything, but I'm thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful to have an exhibit in which different media come together? So having some new poetry by her, maybe asking a colleague to maybe write a piece of music in response. We'll see. It's
beautiful.
Just an idea.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about how that develops. That theater project was amazing. That was so cool. Is there anything that making visual art has done to change or influence your lute playing in a different direction?
When you talk about, any musical instrument, really, and you look at its history and where it came from, how it was played, by whom, in what contexts, there's always a lot to be learned from, right, scholarship or sources or people who have written about that. And I think it's important to consult those kinds of sources and get a good sense of here's how this instrument was played. But then also realizing that, like a visual artist, you are, a musical artist, and you play your instrument, whether subconsciously or not, based on what comes out from inside of you, regarding how you play the instrument, what you might do with the music. It's always important to find out about what we call historical performance practice. So how a particular instrument was played at a certain point in time in history. But then also to maybe look at someone contemporary who maybe writes new music for lute. And there are some people out there who are doing that. And, we are all products of our own time. And there's so much music from past centuries that is played on more modern, more current instruments in a particular way. And there's discussions about, which one is the way to do it or not. That's what makes it such an interesting debate out there, or discussion. But I'm reminded here about some of the lute students that I teach regarding how sort of the visual arts, or my approach to visual creativity, might relate to that. Most of the students who are interested in learning lute have encountered the instrument in some way, shape, or form, whether online or in a concert or something like that. And they are curious about it because of its sound properties, its shape, sometimes the number of strings that it has, and so they want to learn more. And some of them come from a background that's not very musical, and that's fine. And so I find out what sort of their background is, and then based on that I kind of tailor the lessons to their background and their prior knowledge. And it sometimes becomes a puzzle to kind of teach these lessons and to incorporate some new things for them to learn on the fly. And I'm finding that very encouraging, where it's all about learning, it's all about trying, and it's all about figuring something out and see what happens if we try this or we try that. Everyone has different sized hands. Everyone's hands fall more naturally into certain positions than others on the instrument. Right. And so it's been so refreshing to let that take sort of the foreground of the stage, or whatever you might call it, and to observe and to listen to their physical capabilities and their bodies, and then to tailor the lesson according to those things. I think, often in the past, we've had a curriculum for how to teach this instrument or that instrument, or try this or try that. But everyone is so different, and we need to take that into account. And it's also important for keeping the student engaged and for inspiring them to stay with it and to ask more questions, and to try this fingering or try that fingering if that other one doesn't work naturally. That's something that I learned from my guitar teacher that I had when I was in grad school. I came into a lesson sort of thinking, okay, there is only one way to finger this passage, or otherwise, if you can't play it, that's too bad. If you can't play this piece. But he kind of opened my eyes and said, no, you want to choose the fingerings that work for you to play this passage musically.
Right.
And so that has always, and that's okay. Yeah. That has always stuck with me. And I think that relates very much to visual art making, in that to achieve our best in our creativity, we shouldn't be stuck trying to imitate how something was done in past centuries or past decades. You know, if there is an approach that you really enjoy and that produces something unique, go for it.
Absolutely.
I mean, in any medium, you know, as I was sharing with you the other day with the ginkgo leaves, I don't know what will become of it, but I'm very curious to try and see if they can be somehow be incorporated into a painting. And I think that kind of approach, whether it's music or art, will be nourishing to anyone to develop their own unique skills.
Agreed. I know for myself that the best teachers I have had were the ones who took a creative approach to teaching and who looked at me as an individual and asked themselves how they could inspire me more. So I think your students are very lucky. Are there any parts of the creative process where you sometimes feel stuck? And if you get stuck, what do you do to get unstuck?
Yeah, it happens. I think one of the perhaps most, I don't know, but ones that comes to mind most quickly is this idea that if you're not formally trained in something, then you have a handicap right there. You know, you can try to do X, Y, or Z, but you might not be able to reach higher levels, do something more sophisticated, whatever that might be. I'm currently working on a project that is a book review about, or of a wonderful exhibition catalog of the art that was collected and also created by George Gershwin.
Oh.
And I was drawn to it because of the intersections between him as a composer and performer. But yet here he is as a visual artist.
I didn't know that. I didn't know he made visual art. I gotta go look it up now.
Yeah, it's astounding. He collected a number of modernist paintings by contemporary artists, and he also made drawings, portraits specifically. He painted. He was a photographer. And so here we are, and I'm thinking, my goodness, here's someone else in whose career and creative life different arts are connected. And it's mentioned in the literature in various sources, but this exhibition catalog and the essays in it are sort of the first time that we have the primary focus on Gershwin, not as a composer or as a performer, but as someone who seriously engaged with the visual arts. And I find that stunning, incredible, so important to learn about. Anyway, Gershwin did not have the same kind of formal training that contemporaries of his had. He studied with a number of different composition and music theory teachers, but he was primarily initially inspired by this new American musical idiom called jazz. And he is someone who writes popular songs for the stage, for Broadway. He's incredibly gifted and writes music that are beloved pieces and have been ever since his life was cut short at a young age. incredibly inspiring. And here is someone who was very much aware of his shortcomings in his musical training, right, compared to other contemporary composers. But yet he was so prolific, writing songs for the theater stage. And there were critics out there who were sort of convinced that that's his realm and that that's where he should stay active as a composer.
I'm sure, yeah.
But he had this interest in also exploring the symphonic idiom and writing music for orchestra. And so, right, he writes An American in Paris, he writes the Rhapsody in Blue, and there were critics out there, of course, who are finding shortcomings, right, because he doesn't have the same rigorous and formal multi-year training that a composer was supposed to go through. But yet, both of those the pieces have become staples in the history of American music.
There's a reason they're beloved among all the music of his contemporaries. Sorry for interrupting. That's compelling. Yeah.
And so here is, and then he picked up painting, along the side, and he was busy 24/7 writing music for shows, for plays, as well as working on, let's say, the Concerto in F. And so incredibly inspiring. But I just thought of this question, right? I think everyone has those moments. To get out of those moments, find other ways to be inspired by. And as a good friend of mine says, you have to do you. You have to be you, right? You do you. And realize that you have something to contribute to your artistic community, even if you don't have, right, the traditional training. I don't have a formal training in being a visual artist. I have really learned mostly by observing others, looking closely at the art by other people, just being drawn in by looking at, books of art by master artists from the history of Western art, as well as contemporary artists, and connecting with local artists in town and looking at their work, and realizing, even if you don't have that traditional formal training, that doesn't mean you can't be creative in a meaningful way.
Absolutely.
And so, so these thoughts of self-doubt, also this idea of perfectionism, right, can get us stuck, very much so. And I think communicating with others in those kinds of moments and getting some feedback. What do you think about this, right? I've drawn this in this way. Does that look this way or that way? It can be anything elementary. And what I've also learned by taking classes in the last few years is that it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You may not need an extensive study of, let's say, perspective in the visual arts. You probably should be aware of the existence of that concept and how it manifests itself in, the art of the Renaissance, let's say. But if that's not a concept that's going to impact what you are trying to accomplish yourself as a visual artist, then it's okay to not show, hey, I've done my homework in the idea of perspective. Here's what it looks like on the page. No. And I similarly with Gershwin, and I'm not a Gershwin expert by any means. I'm just fascinated by his creative life and the interests that he had. He was so comfortable in writing songs for the stage. He was fascinated by rhythm, partly through listening to jazz music, and feeling elements of time and meter and syncopation that just grabbed him. And so he brought that into his own compositional output. Didn't matter if he had formal training or not. He did it.
Basically, it's okay to have fun and to choose what you want to spend time developing and to choose what you don't care about spending time developing in order to have fun with your creativity, right? Is that a fair way to summarize?
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And I think that and that's, again, it's an act of courage to realize that and to say, okay, this is okay. I'm doing it this way. And it's very liberating and uplifting.
Yes.
So, yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned inspiration, like finding another source of inspiration earlier when you were sharing advice on getting stuck, and I really appreciated what you said about that. And you had brought up the Creative Ideas series that I'm doing on my channel. That's, really the purpose behind that is to hopefully give people other doors through which to walk, to get inspired. Get out of your own niche or your own art form and the perspective that you usually take, because that's how you're working, and go through a back door of some kind into your creativity through another kind of activity than what you normally do. It's kind of what I'm hoping to assist people in doing. Do you find that when you get stuck in one creative project, sometimes you can go get involved in another one? Like, I know you're also a photographer and you take a lot of beautiful nature photos. Do you find that, like, for example, if you're stuck with a painting or something, you go on a walk, maybe take your camera to, look at some compositions outside or any other kind of hobby that you might get involved in could unlock a perspective that would help you get unstuck in the project you're stuck on?
Absolutely. One issue that comes up more or less often when you've spent, a certain amount of time with a project or with a certain medium and you feel stuck, step away, either to take a break or to come back, look at your work with a fresh set of eyes, hopefully. Take a break, yes, go outside. Sometimes I go and practice an instrument if I've had, I feel like, okay, I can't really accomplish much more today on this project. I'm going to do something else. Or, yeah, I mean, honestly, like a walk outside, clear your mind, see some, I feel a sort of a great sense of space that allows me to sort of open up my mind, and whether that's going to, focus on the colors of the trees, for example, or the way there's different walking paths within this small area, and they go in different directions. They come together in the center, and it's sort of like a sun, perhaps, with different rays going away from it. And it's very refreshing and relaxing. It clears my mind. And I think then I will come back, and I might have ideas on that walk or on that bike ride about my project. And I might think, oh wait, I haven't tried this, or maybe I can try that, right? And then you come back and you come back with new, different set of eyes. And I think that's so important. also, this reminds me of another lesson I learned from taking the art classes. Right when we work on our piece, whatever medium, we sit more or less close to it with our eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and we stay that way for sometimes extended periods of time. And we forget that it's actually as important to get up and step away from it and look at your piece from a distance. And it is mind-blowing what you see when you do step back that you didn't see up close. It's almost like you all of a sudden you see the larger picture.
It's true.
And it's very vital to do. I have found you'll see that maybe you might want more contrast in your image for whatever reason, or to bring out maybe this color more, or to create a bit more depth, again, depending on what your goal is, right? But yes, the short answer is, yeah, go do something else, step away from it. It will get you unstuck. I'm or at least in my experience. And also to tell yourself that it's okay to do this, like that you don't have to finish your project by the end of the day and that it has to be good, whatever good means. No. You can take the time that you need, hopefully. I mean, unless there's like a deadline. And that we shouldn't ideally, right, have to force ourselves to do certain things because it needs to be done by midnight or by tomorrow morning or something like that. And I think that that's perhaps also a good way for our mental health to let the piece kind of develop and do its thing. Of course, sometimes I think we're in these moments where, oh, this is so exciting, this is so much fun. I want to finish this before I go to bed.
Yeah. I have that problem a lot.
That's great. I mean, everyone works differently, but respect how your creativity unfolds over, a period of time, hopefully, and step away from it and come back to it.
That's
and
great advice.
Have a conversation with someone else about it. It's always amazing to me what feedback one can get from others about your creative ideas. Oh, this reminds me of such and such. Have you maybe tried that? I don't know.
Yeah, I really appreciate that kind of feedback too. It's very helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Part 3 will be coming out soon. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to my channel. Have a beautiful day with your creativity, my friend. See you next time. Bye.